All right, let's take this across to our special guests, Kirit Parekh and R.S. Sharma, who are joining us live right here on ET Now. Mr. Kirit Parekh and Mr. R.S. Sharma, two men who know all about Indian oil and gas space. We also got Sushil Choksi on the phone line. But let's take you, Mr. R.S. Sharma, and it's very good chatting with you after a very, very long while. That's Mukesh Ambani and Bob Dudley walking out after making that big announcement. Let's please go across to our guests. It's a big story. $6 billion of fresh investment into the Indian oil and gas space is what has been announced. I'm going to ask you the big picture question. I'll come to, specifics in just a bit with both Mr. Parekh and you. Is this the beginning of the virtuous investment cycle in India kick-starting? I mean, private sector investment was stalled up until now. Is this the big private sector investment that was needed to break ground for others to follow in? Mr. Sharma.
Well, we have been wishing this to happen for the last 6 years, and we see that last 6 years, virtually there has not been any announcement for investment in this sector. So you can see me smiling. So since I also chair FICCI Hydrocarbon Committee, I can say from industry point of view, from economy point of view, it is a very, very strongly positive news. And this changes dramatically the sentiments about investments into India, about investments into upstream sector, and especially this gas sector. And look at it, the first time after we hear the statement coming from Reliance that they are going to make a massive investment, $6 billion. Oh, that's a big investment. I feel that augurs very, very well for the sector, for the industry, for the economy, and overall sentiments that currently that India, deservingly that warrants. So I'm very happy at that.
All right, India warrants good sentiment, and it looks like the $6 billion that's going to be pumped in by BP and Reliance is going to kickstart that. Mr. Parekh, I'm going to have your first words on the fresh investments made. I know we had a little chat at 4:30 p.m. when indications came of fuel retailing, but it looks like that was just a sideshow. This is really the big breaking news at this point in time. $6 billion worth of fresh investments that will pump in about 30 to 35 cubic meters of gas, sustained over 7 to 8 years. How big an investment do you really believe this is? And is this the beginning of fresh investments, not just in the Indian economy, but particularly in the Indian oil and gas space?
Yeah, I think this is just really an amazing announcement in many ways, because the whole scene has been quite quiet for the last 6 years or so, and this is this affirmation that D6 basin, they believe, has lots of gas and they're going to bring it out, the eastern coast gas fields. I think that's a great news for the country. Secondly, I think that the fact that they are willing to invest such amount of money is again an affirmation into the growth of the Indian economy. Thirdly, what I was even more impressed was that announcement about this innovative, disruptive mobility solutions that they plan to work on. This is typical in some sense of Mukesh Ambani and Reliance, that they really try to anticipate what is the next big sector in which growth is going to take place, or growth will be a new thing. Like they went into mobile technology at the right time. They're deciding to go into even when they went into, I would say way back when they went into the Vimal textile and built the world's top leading technological textile mill and so on. Something that was always on the global scale and competitive at that level. And I think this whole idea of going into disruptive transport technology or mobility technology is really a wonderful idea, because I think over the years we will see the electric vehicles of various kinds, and various kinds of technologies would make a dramatic change in not only the mobility space but also in the energy space as well. And I believe that once you look from a long-term point of view of how renewables and solar and wind are growing, you will, as in the end Bob said, the need for having gas as a balancing fuel would be more and more, so that even if you were to look at 30 years ahead and see how can India have an energy technology which is consistent with a 2-degree or even 1.5-degree global warming, then you would see that we will need lots of solar, lots of wind, and lots of gas technologies in power generation. And if you add to that electric vehicles, the demand for electricity, despite all these energy efficiency measures that are going up, will increase also substantially. So I think this is a great statement.
Right,
it shows
right.
Really a clear long-term vision.
Okay, a clear long-term vision, a great statement. But Mr. Parekh, stay with us. Mr. Sharma, I'm going to take this question with you. They very categorically said, and not once, but it was said multiple times in the press conference, that the new policy changes are more predictable. They are making us confident. They are the ones that are making us attract the top dollar. What are these policy changes that Mukesh Ambani is referring to? Because it is also not a secret that Mukesh Ambani was not fine with the gas prices that were fixed by this government when it came into office. He had issues with that. He thought that was too low. It wasn't incentivizing production. And today he says, I am fine with the gas prices. What has changed? What policy changes is he really referring to? I've also got Devin Choksi joining me, and I'll go to him next. But to you first, I'm going to just pick your brains very quickly on what are the policy changes that he's referring to, which is making him park the top dollar.
Well, to share with you, I have the same amount of suspense as you have, because personally, as I look at it from industry point of view, the current pricing policy for gas is not good for the economy. It is not at all good for making this, gas-based economy and reducing import dependence. When the domestic producers of crude oil, they get international parity price. Why not the gas producer get the international parity price? Why that benchmark index that has been worked out, that has been, having all the, markets which are gas surplus market, producing market, it should relate to more, the economy which import this LNG. And so I'm not happy at all with the current gas pricing policy, and going forward, I feel either they would have got some assurance from the government that current pricing policy would be modified, would be more suitable for more investments. I am not even just looking at this 6 billion investment. This sector required $60 billion investments. And that sort of investment will not come at the current, the pricing policies that we have right now. So I wish that the confidence that is demonstrated by Mukesh Ambani and Bob Dudley, that gets translated into the reality. And maybe they had the meeting with the minister, with the government officials, they would have got some sort of assurances. I can only say, as the chairman FICCI Hydrocarbon Committee, that that augurs very, very well for the sector, very well for the economy, for the industry, and we really would wish that this sort of reforms, gas pricing reforms, comes about sooner than expected.
Mr. Parekh, if I may ask you to be frank and fair there, just like Mr. Sharma has been, and he is right. I mean, he is right that the pricing policy was something that Mukesh Ambani was not happy with. What has changed in the policy for Mukesh Ambani's renewed faith in the Indian oil and gas space? I know for a fact that he had issues with the pricing policy of the gas. He thought that was too low, and now he's saying, I'm fine with it, I'm willing to invest. What has changed? Because it's a very cordial, it's a very congenial tone that is now being made. Even on ONGC, he says, it's one arbitration, but we continue to work with them before and after the dispute. Is he willing to smoke the peace pipe is one question, and the second question is, what has changed in policy for him to have this renewed faith? Mr. Parekh?
I think I agree completely with what Mr. Sharma said. You know, I am not happy with the current gas price policy. I think, as he said clearly, that we should have been internationally competitive gas price policy should be there, just like we are giving the international prices to ONGC and others for crude oil. So I think it is an inconsistency, and it does lead to all kinds of distortions in the economy. So I would have certainly liked a thing. Now, I don't know what changes that Mr. Mukesh was referring to, but it seems to me that he must have got certain assurance, and at least the assurance that in the new gas fields that you'll find, he will get competitive international prices. Because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Right?
Okay, just hold on. I understand. Yes, I understand. It doesn't make sense if he hasn't got assurances, because this present policy does not really make things easy, and he had an issue with the same policy till some time back. I've also got Deven Choksi, and just to get a market view on this, just to get a view on what investors in Reliance are willing to make of this $6 billion of fresh investments that's going to come in. How is the market reading into this, Mr. Choksi? Does the market believe that the distraction of RIL-BP is put to rest? He's back to focusing on bread and butter, which is oil and gas. After 6 long years, he's making an investment call of nearly $6 billion. Mr. Choksi?
Yep. Yeah, so it's largely to do with what BP has been thinking globally. BP has a mission statement for next 5 years, wherein 2/3 of their new investment is going to be in upstream and 1/3 would be in the downstream and retailing. I think the same thing is getting echoed here, I think, which is there in the rest of the world. They are committing themselves further with the $6 billion worth of investment. The focus would be largely on the gas and exploration and development of the fields. So certainly, I think this is going to be a renewed focus coming in. At the same time, I think the emphasis has been on the retailing side. And the retailing side, I'm not surprised also at the same time, because now the fuel is being retailed at a daily market determined price, so which is a completely free market now. And by grading the fuel differently for different purpose, is again, I think they are talking about creating the value addition out of this particular space. So all in all put together, market would remain fairly confident about this move going forward. And as I see it, I think in next 2 years, we should be seeing a larger announcement coming on this front, as far as I think the gas and the discovery part is concerned. So let's wait for that part of it. Market will remain confident on this side.
So market remains confident on what the move of RIL is, but how how relieved is market also of one more thing that you spoke about, venturing into fuel retail. Reliance is not a debutante or a virgin here. They've been there before. They retreated when oil prices touched $150 billion. I remember way back in 2010. My question to you really is this move being read as a strategic move, Mr. Choksi? How is the market reading into this? Because when oil prices spiked the way they did, political compulsions will force the government to compensate their state-owned companies. What happens to private operators? What happens to a Reliance Industries? What happens to SR, which is of course now going to bow out of this because of its deal with Rosneft? But what happens to Reliance then? Will they continue to take the burden?
Well, according to me, with the free pricing policy, I think you are relatively better off. One important aspect. Second, I think with the free pricing policy, you will have an opportunity to price your fuel differently at a premium, as well as I think at the discount on a given day. So that is what I think the world is working with. And I guess I think the BP and Reliance put together, even at the 1400 gas station that Reliance has recommissioned, and BP has a license of 3500. So I think they're close to 5,000 already. Plus, I think those gas stations which are not yet recommissioned by Reliance, they could also go into it. So ultimately, I think it could be a 10,000 gas station business, which probably I think this company may look at for the retailing purpose. And let's not also forget one thing, that the Reliance could possibly do the retailing further, give further color to retailing with the kind of a value chain that they are talking about. So overall, I think retailing as a space, I think would possibly grow well, and I think it could add into more value addition for both these partners.
As one of the most respected market participants, Mr. Deven Choksi, are you willing to agree with me when I say it almost looks like this evening Mr. Ambani is done with his sideshow, his attraction of RIL-BP, and he's back to where the moolah and the money and the bread and butter is, which is oil and gas? Is that how market men like you are reading into this?
Well, I think the core business would definitely remain important to him, because he has expanded the refining capacity. he will have to further, I think, expand into the retailing segment of the fuel for sure, because the free market would allow him to do that. He can play the disruption game here as well, I think, in taking over the share of the fuel retailing business like he did in case of Jio. And as I see it, I think as a conglomerate, I think he has created a good footprint in the consumer space. So retailing would give him a equal amount of weight from the industrial product to the consumer product, I think, as you want to call it as. It will give him a good footprint over there as well. So I don't think that it is one over the other. I think that both Jio and the core businesses, I think they have got the value proposition to talk about. So certainly it's a balanced portfolio as far as Reliance is concerned, as I see it, between the industrial product and the consumer businesses that they have built up.
Okay. Mr. Kirit Parikh, if I may bring this back to you and just ask you the question from where we started off. The question really is that private investment in India was not breaking grounds. They were over leveraged. There was excess capacity. Utilization levels were not good. And which is why the question was always asked of policymakers. You know, what you're announcing is all very good, but when does fresh private investment begin to break ground? Are we seeing an instance of that happen today? You know, the leap of faith that Reliance and BP is taking. I'm just wondering, is this the beginning of private investment breaking ground? Will more people follow suit?
Well, let me first make a comment on the earlier thing. You know, with 5,000 stations, it will also perhaps will have become electricity charging stations for EV vehicles. I won't be surprised by that. But then coming to the question you are asking me about whether this is the beginning of private investment. You know, private investment has been sluggish because of certain fear of excess capacity in many areas. Certainly in gas, which we are importing, there is not that much of an excess capacity. So I think an investment in this sector does not necessarily indicate that private investment will coming up. But the fact that a large amount of investment is being made private investment is being made in this country would have some impact on other fellows who are beginning to think about investment from a slightly longer term perspective. They might be motivated to come in. So I am merely saying that I am a bit cautious about whether this is going to trigger in a huge flow of private investment or not. It will do some, but how much we will have to wait and see.
Just hold your thoughts there, both Mr. Parikh and Mr. Sharma and Mr. Choksi, who's with us. I'm given to understand Mr. Deepak Mahurkar tracks RIL very, very closely and is joining us on the phone line. How do you read this big announcement? Is the market going to be overall enthusiastic about what Reliance is announcing there, the leap of faith that they're willing to take, the renewed focus on oil and gas? $6 billion worth of investment, 40,000 crore rupees is a big investment that's being announced, and the aim is to produce about 30 to 35 cubic meter of gas over a sustained period of 7 to 8 years. Mr. Mahurkar.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for bringing me on this. Just to respond to your specific question, indeed, it is a big commitment being announced to spend so much of expenditure on either exploration or developing the assets that have been discovered. It is also a big announcement from the context of committing retail fuel, which is becoming very, very competitive in Indian landscape. So I would say government having welcomed these kind of investments and making way for private investment come in is a very different signal to the rest of the investments. And I would tend to definitely take it with caution as to what impact will it have on other investors to think, because the journey for both these companies has been long. It's been more than 10 years that such efforts have been made, both for attempt to get licenses for retail and discover more fields and make investments in E&P. So investors do know that it takes long for any such investor in petroleum sector coming in, especially private sector, to establish and commit its investment, grow its confidence. So I would say it's a big announcement, confidence building, but there will be question marks on whether investors will generate interest right away.
Okay, big announcement. Doesn't know whether it is going to generate investor interest right away. But let's take this back to Mr. Sharma. And Mr. Sharma, while you spent a lot of time in your career doing upstream, you're also someone who's familiar with how, retail and downstream and all of that really works. This is a space completely dominated by state-owned operators, HPCL, BPCL, IOC. What is the different proposition that you expect Reliance and BP to offer here? A different consumer experience altogether, or what are you really looking at?
Innovative technologies and the solutions which the consumer, the customer, when they go overseas, they look at the developed economies. So those kind of, atmosphere to be available at the fuel stations in India. And I'm sure when BP, RIL, and both of them, the CEOs, they have spoken about disruptive technologies. If those kind of, practices are seen at the fuel stations, I'm sure that is a kind of disruptive change that we have been looking forward, and that will be a big wake-up call for this PSU refineries, marketing companies, that they also need to innovate at much faster pace to keep pace in the competition with the private sector. And this is the time when I see when the that under recoveries have been done away with, and we find a level playing field, daily pricing to be announced. I feel that's a very lucrative scenario for the private sector to come in, and I'm sure the PSU marketing companies, they must be feeling a lot of heat. They must be sweating that when they suddenly they will be subjected to this sort of competition. They will really have to innovate themselves, but ultimately the beneficiary is going to be the customer. So that's a good thing, and that is what we feel the Indian economy should be looking at, and that will bring much more. Look at I keep talking about the investment sentiment. These kind of announcements change the investor sentiments in a big way. So I can say that personally I'm very happy that what the announcements have been made today, and I'm sure we are in the course of time there was a big gap, long gap. We will keep hearing such positive news, and in the process the media people like Supriya, you who have been covering this sector so intensely, you will again get busy. We'll be happy to see that you calling us more on your TV channel for the comments.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Mr. Sharma, with or without news breaking. But let's take this across to Mr. Mayuresh Joshi, who's also joining us right here on ET Now. It's a big announcement that's made, and a lot of people are actually beginning to say, like Mr. Sharma was pointing out there, that this almost is a day of reckoning as far as the Indian private investment scene is concerned. But I want to specifically speak about RIL. How are you reading this development in the company? What is the impact going to be as far as the markets are concerned on RIL? Is this a renewed bet on oil and gas once again, a refocus on oil and gas? There's been too much distraction on RIL-GEO, something that is entrenched operators are finding very tough to let Reliance win. But oil and gas is where the big moolah and the big bet is. Mr. Mayuresh Joshi, what's your bet?
Evening, Supriya. So till this point of time, I think the valuations on SOTP basis were more or less to do with their two core businesses of petchem and refining. So largely there was no value that was getting ascribed to the upstream business of Reliance because of the faltering volumes that we've seen come out of KGD6. But with the investments of $6 billion jointly coming through with BP, my own sense is that the kind of focus has clearly shifted. He's pumped in huge amount of investment, 200,000 crores in the telecom business, and he's created a clear disruptive force within the field of telecom. But largely, again, I think with the oil and gas exploration that he's probably looking at this point of time, specifically developing the R series, again, I think the focus will stay, and the presumption here is that over the next 2 to 3 years, if he's able to meet the kind of targets that he's talking about, there can be some amount of subscription to the value from the upstream business, which is almost negligible or not accounted for by analysts. So yes, I think in that sense, I think there might be some value coming through on the oil and gas, the upstream business of Reliance. But the pumping in of money, I think, how he's going to fund that is going to be equally interesting as well. So I think the stock might be a little bit volatile unless it tries to understand and figure out how the entire funding is going to happen in terms of internal accruals for the oil and gas capex.
It's an important point that you're talking about. I mean, how will the funding happen? And that's what the markets will watch out for. But will this enthuse investors? Will this excite investors that Reliance is once again looking at KG-D6? Because KG-D6 was supposed to be this one gold mine. It didn't turn out to be like that, and there were regulatory hurdles that one got into. But today, Mr. Ambani is singing a very different tune. He's saying, I'm happy with policy. I'm even happy with the gas prices that are offered to me right now. And I have faith, and which is why I'm willing to invest. How do you think markets are going to read into these comments? Because there was a regulatory overhang on the stock previously. With Mr. Ambani's comments today, it looks like it's a regulatory regime that's favoring RIL, that works for RIL, that works in favor of RIL.
So again, Supriya, I think the entire sense here is that the gas price revision is going to happen periodically. So I think how the pricing happens is going to depend upon the demand-supply dynamics overall, and how the domestic gas pricing situation will pan out. That's point number one. Point number two, within the core capex that he's doing in terms of the investment horizon that he's mapping out, largely, again, I think the return on invested capital that he's going to pump in the oil and gas business has to get monitored in terms of what output actually starts coming out over the next few years. So again, I think we've seen the kind of ROE compression that the stock went through when a large part of the capex was happening both on the core and the telecom part of the business. As the capex on the oil and gas or the upstream part of the business starts coming through, what kind of return on investment capital can that business generate over the next few quarters? I think the street will be equally interested in knowing that. So I think my own sense is that if they're probably successful in exploring the kind of opportunities that they can over the next few quarters, the oil and gas business will get value, which had no value, as I mentioned earlier. I think analysts were ascribing no value probably to the upstream business because of the faltering volumes. And again, I think the shale gas business was becoming a little bit unviable in terms of the valuation. So yes, I think some value can get ascribed on that front, but how he's going to fund that entire part of the $6 billion in terms of partnership with BP is going to be really interesting. So I think my own sense is that the stock might be volatile for some length of time, but over a longer period of time, I think the positive outlook can get maintained if the numbers probably start coming out both in terms of production and on the gas pricing front as well.
All right, completely out of time here on that note. Mayuresh Joshi, Devin Choksi, Mr. Kirit Parak and Mr. R.S. Sharma, thank you very, very much for taking time out this evening and speaking to us right here at ET Now. $6 billion worth of investment, guys. This is 40,000 crore rupees. This is big investment being made. We at ET Now believe that this is investment and this is fresh investment that's breaking ground. We're wondering if this is the start of a virtuous investment cycle that has long eluded Indian economy. We're keeping our fingers crossed that we hope this is.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.